Hi everybody, Michael Davis here. Welcome to Bone2Pick, and I am super excited to have an opportunity to sit down this month with our Artist of the Month for March, the great Steve Davis. Thank you, Steve, for allowing us into your beautiful home today. So we're coming to you from Stamford, Connecticut, where Steve resides. As all of us know, Steve is an internationally renowned and critically acclaimed jazz trombonist and composer. He has performed and recorded and toured with a who's who of the jazz world, including lengthy associations with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Jackie McLean, Chick Corea, who we just recorded a brand new CD, the cooperative sextet, One for All. Also worked with Freddie Hubbard, Jimmy Heath, the Dizzy Gillespie All-Star Big Band, Christian McBride Big Band, Cedar, Walton, Ron Carter Big Band. The list goes on, and we will cover a lot of these names. So looking forward to this. He's been on the faculty at the Hart School in Hartford, Connecticut since 1991. Soon to release his 20th CD thereabouts. I lost track trying to add them all up as a leader. He's also the proud dad of a young, outstanding guitar player, his son Tony Davis. Having followed them myself, he's appeared on virtually every major jazz poll over the last 2 decades. I've been a huge fan of his ever since I heard him the very first time years and years and years ago, and I'm honored that he was willing to play on my Absolute Trombone 2 CD, came in and played a gorgeous solo. And I'm also honored that I get to sit down and talk with him today about his extraordinary career and amazing life in music. So, Steve, thank you so much for carving out some time for us.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you're here.
We've been talking about it for a couple years now, and I'm excited that it's here today.
We finally got there.
Let's talk about, and we were talking about it before we started, let's talk about growing up in Binghamton. I know you came from musical household and also such a fruitful period for young musicians there. The great Tony Cadlick, arguably one of the great trumpet players anywhere in the world. You guys grew up together. Tell us about that time in your early life.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Binghamton was a lovely place to grow up and spend your childhood. And I first met Tony Cadlick on the Little League field at Recreation Park on the west side of Binghamton. And by the way, the great bassist Slam Stewart lived in his last 20 years of his life in Binghamton with his wife
Wow.
Claire. So his house, 80 Chestnut Street, was kind of beyond the right field wall, across the park.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and but Tony Cadlick was the kind of short center fielder who robbed our slugger Eddie Westbrook to end the game, and we thought, who's that Cadillac guy? I had no idea he was, such a great musician. So we wound up playing in the stage band together in junior high school. Dina DeRose, the great singer and vocalist, grew up there. John Hollenbeck,
oh wow, okay.
Drummer and composer and band leader. Chris Jensen, great tenor sax player. Tom Dempsey, a fine guitarist. Tony Cadlick and myself, and we just had a slew of musicians to grow up with. All of them is really a great source of pride.
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember Tony telling me about, was it your dad's record collection or your grandfather's? He would say, I'd come over to Steve's house and we'd listen to all these records and introduce me to all this music. And
That's
an awesome.
My parents' living room was like jam session headquarters, and there was a little club in town called the Music Box. And so our first real gigs were on Wednesday nights. I think we made $10 a piece or something, and we got to play and we got money, and but it was great. The school district was very supportive of the young musicians. The Binghamton Youth Symphony was a great experience. All of that was just wonderful.
That's awesome. Well, let's go forward a little bit. You've had such a long association with Hart. I'd kind of like to break it up into two periods. Certainly you've been teaching there for a number of years, but you were there as a student. Maybe talk about those years, and you started that long time association with Jackie McLean. Very important, I'm sure. And maybe you could talk about how that relationship evolved and what it was like going to Hart as a student back then.
Yeah. So I got to Hartford to attend Hart in 1985. Met the great Professor Jackie McLean. It changed my life, really, in so many ways. And he mentored generations of young musicians. It's I don't know, it's hard to put into words really, but I met my future wife there, my first wife, Mary. And she was a piano major, classical major, and then she switched to jazz when she heard Jackie McLean play and was just around the scene, you know, and she, next thing she knew, she was playing Bud Powell solos, and he was very encouraging to her. And I could just go on and on about all the great musicians who were at the school. Antoine Roney, Wallace's brother, was a few years ahead of me, and it was a very inspiring time. I met the bassist Nat Reeves, who to this day continues to teach there and has been my friend and colleague for 30 years. But he was one of my teachers. So the experience was incredible. You know, Jackie provided such a link to the history of the music. I mean, he grew up learning to play from Bud Powell and Charlie Parker and Monk and Mingus and Art Blakey and Miles Davis. And so he really, he loved to share those stories with us and just kind of give it to us, give us the essence. Not just the technical side, but the sort of social context and historical context, and just incredible.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, just having a resource like that was part of the music, part of the creation of the music.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible. You know?
Yeah, and so we try to perpetuate that. Jackie's son, Renee McLean, is also on faculty at the school. Our chair is Javon Jackson, who came on in more recent years, but he's very much cut from the same cloth in terms of being connected to the roots of the music and the history, and Nat Reeves, as I mentioned, and it's a great department to be a part of for many years, and so many alumni, Jimmy Green, Wayne Escoffrey, Desron Douglas, James Burton was one of my students.
Wow.
Yeah, the trombonist. Young drummer Jonathan Barber, Josh Bruno, great young trumpet player. There's so many. There's too many to name.
And I'm sure the list is going to continue with faculty like that. You know.
There's some youngins up there right now. There's a young alto player, a young lady named Sarah Hanahan.
Okay.
Get ready. She's got the fire. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite things that I saw, we were talking about it before we started, is you playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. I just think that's so cool, and you were kind enough to share some of the experiences. But tell us about what that was like. I know you said you joined him in December of 1989 and stayed through till Art's passing.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Wow. Well, yet another way that Jackie McLean changed my life. When I was a student still, the year before that, he had me sit in his office one day. He got on the phone, the good old-fashioned landline, no cell phones back then, and he called Art Blakey, and I heard Art's voice, hello, and Jackie played with him in the 50s. I mean, he was one of the original Jazz Messengers. So they had this quick conversation, and he basically called him to tell him, I've got a little guy up here. This is 1988. And he said, I got a little trombone player named Steve Davis. He can play, Art, if you need somebody. And he said, okay, well, tell him to come down and sit in when he moves to New York. And so I was never in the same room as the two of them, but he recommended me. So when I finally did go to sit in with all the scores of other horn players, and Art Blakey said, oh, yeah, so that's you, Jackie's boy. And that was how I even was anybody, to have and it just gave me inspiration and gave me enough confidence or nerve, I guess, to even try to just be around. So when the time came, Art, called Jackie McLean looking for me the day after Christmas, and so I get a phone call up in Binghamton. I had gone home with Tony Cadlick, in fact, for like 2 days. I had been at Sweet Basil hanging around and had been listening to the repertoire. So Jackie McLean calls. My mother says, Stephen, it's Professor McLean. Now I'm out of school. I'm 22 years old, but he was still Professor McLean. And he gets on the phone. He says, son, you need to call Buhana. I'm going to give you the number. Call him right now. He's looking for you. So 212. So I call. About 5 different people passed the phone around, and finally I heard, hello. And I said, hello, gulp, Mr. Blakey, my name is Steve Davis. I play trombone. I don't know if you remember me. He said, oh, yeah, Jackie's boy. Well, I'm going to need you down the club tonight, Steve. And this is 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Binghamton, New York, which is 3 hours up through the Catskills. And I said, yes, of course, I'll be there. So we had a brief conversation. It was surreal. So I hung up the phone, called up my friend Tony Cadlick, and said, Tony, string of expletives, you got to pick me up. And Tony's holy, I'll be there in a half an hour. God bless him. He dropped everything because we were going to go back the next day, back to the city. So Tony Cadlick got me to that gig.
Wow.
And yeah, and no rehearsal, no charts, no music stands. That you never use music stands with Art Blakey. I mean, you just either knew the music, and what you didn't know, you figured out in a hurry.
Yeah.
Or lay out,
Yeah.
And an incredible experience. Wow.
That's amazing. Would you mind sharing the story about Art's his philosophy on having a new person join the band? I love that story.
Well, as you know, our colleague and the great Frank Laskey, the great trombonist, Kalimba Shabazz, Frank Laskey, he had been playing in the band. I'd been listening to him. Robin Eubanks before that, Delphio Marsalis before that, Tim Williams, Bone before that. So Frank Laskey was in the band, and I had no idea he was still going to be in the band when my little behind showed up at Sweet Basil. So it was tense, and that's kind of, as I found out firsthand, that's kind of how Art did things over the years. Maybe not in every case, but when he felt maybe it was time for you to move on, he just brought someone else in the band on your instrument and then just wanted to see what was going to happen. Maybe you keep your gig, maybe you both stay in the band, whatever. And so I didn't say much that week. I was scared to death. I was just trying to be there, and I wound up staying for 9 months, and Frank did leave and sort of bequeathed the trombone chair to me, and we're great friends now, and have been for years. But that was a little rough. Now it's funny, but I learned a great deal in a hurry.
Yeah.
And my first record date was Art's last. And the record's called One for All on A&M Records, and that was my song. And being the new guy, we recorded for 2 days. Jeff Keezer, Javon Jackson, Brian Lynch, Essie and Essie, Dale Barlow, great tenor player from Australia. So they had all brought music, and they had all been there. And so finally, the end of the second day, Art just looks at me and he says, hey, you Steve, didn't you bring something? I said, yeah, well, go ahead and get it together then. So Kenwood Denard and Richard T. had come from another session and an adjoining studio. And so he's kind of, shooting the bull with them. We're running through my little song. And we're trying to get the harmonies. And then he finally says, okay, he gets back in the booth. He sits down. He says, let's knock this out. Let's go. And I kind of sheepishly said, Art, don't you want to run it through? No, I got it. So he had been listening the whole time. And we did one take. And he put the thing on it, man. I mean, it's just, and so I remember thinking, well, they'll never use this, and it was the last one, but at least I got to feel what it was like to have one of my songs played by Art and the Messengers. Well, lo and behold, it wound up being the title track and the first tune on the record, and I don't know how that happened, but it did. And so the band, One for All, with Eric Alexander and all those guys, Joe Farnsworth, Rotundi, Dave Hazeltine, Peter Washington, now John Weber, and myself, that collective group took its name from that song, which was not my idea either, as I mentioned. That was Joe Farnsworth's idea.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's certainly a great name for that group too, since it's a cooperative group. It's perfect,
Yeah, 20 years now that band's been playing.
That's awesome. Let's talk, and thank you for sharing those stories. That's just amazing stuff, man. That's incredible. Let's talk about your return to Hart. Now you come back as a teacher. You joined Jackie McLean's band.
Yeah.
And talk about that time. I know that was probably 92, something like around then.
90, exactly, to 97. Almost 6 years that I not only began teaching as an adjunct, again, thanks to Jackie McLean, but he put me in his band, and so I was playing next to he and Renee McLean on the front line, Nat Reeves, Eric McPherson, and Alan Palmer. So Eric and Alan and I were kind of the babies in the group. Wow. We went all over the world. We played the Vanguard every year. Made a few recordings. That was just like graduate school, you know. And I often felt like having to follow Jackie McLean after he was in his 60s then. He was playing so incredibly great on such a high level, and it was fierce, you know. And I remember many times where I would look across at Renee McLean and think like, I don't want to go next. And he'd look at me, and now this is his son who's been playing with him his whole life, and he'd look at me and go, you want to go next? And so I didn't feel so bad. So I would say, oh, okay, you know. And you had to do something. That's all I can say. But Jackie really gave me, again, a lot of encouragement. One time I said something to the effect, you know, I just don't feel like I'm making it, you know, and what should I do? And all he said was, just, Steve, he said, son, just let go. Let go. And he said, if you crack a note or you miss an idea, nobody knows but you, man. You sound great. You sound, man, you love your concept, you know, just let go. That really helped me.
Yeah.
Don't try to be perfect. Another time we were at the Rhythm of the Earth recording date at Rudy Van Gelder's, and Roy Hargrove and I were concerned because he was a guest on the record that we had messed up some little passage in one of the arrangements, and so Jackie loved the take. So it was kind of a downer that here come the two young guys, you know, I think we might have, you know, and he said, man, and then he just said, you know, this ain't no symphony, man. Don't get me wrong, I love classical music, you know that, but man, this is the people's music. It's not supposed to be perfect, you know.
Wow.
Just let me listen to the take, kind of, you know, like, don't try to make everything perfect, you know, and that was very liberating to. Because he could be very much of a perfectionist in his own way, but playing with Jackie helped me find my concept as an improviser and band leader in so many ways. Yeah, just incredible.
Awesome. You mentioned One for All, and I know that started maybe towards the end of that period, right in '96. I think I read somewhere that you guys started that group, and how did that come to? Thanks for mentioning the personnel, and how did that come to pass? And now you guys are still going strong, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, right?
Yeah.
So that's terrific.
We, I had met Joe Farnsworth probably first because he's from Massachusetts, and I had been in Hartford all those years, and he and Eric went to William Patterson. Anyway, Joe, Eric, and Jim Rotundi had been playing together for a while, and I just kind of fell in with those guys up at Augie's.
Right.
You know, which is now Smoke
yeah.
Jazz Club, yeah. And we just hit it off musically. Jim and Eric were so strong with what they were doing, so I would just kind of try to find third voicings, and you know, again, no rehearsing, no music. At first, it was just playing tunes like Janine and you know whatever, and just try to find some hip harmonies and then eventually Dave Hazeltine started to play with us and write, and that's it really took off from there.
Yeah.
So Jim and Eric write, Dave writes. I've contributed. Everybody's contributed to the book at one time or another, but primarily it's been Hazeltine and Alexander and Rotundi and myself. And I don't know, we just kind of rubbed off on each other and you know, musically influenced one another and for some reason, it just works. That band there's a chemistry there.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
There's something about the your individual styles that it's not all the same thing. Like you and in the brass world, you and Jim are different, equally great, but have your own unique voices, and it just goes really well together from the listener's perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great band, and I believe we're gonna get back together this June at Smoke and do a weekend.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if we're gonna record then or not, but hopefully, I think we're gonna do another recording sometime this year and keep it going. Keep the ball rolling.
Oh, we'll look forward to hearing that for sure. Another one that I loved is your longtime association with the great Chick Corea, and I know you just did a recording with him a couple of weeks back now, and tell us about what it's like working with Chick Corea. I think I don't know anybody who's not a fan of Chick Corea, but how did that come about, and how did that kind of evolve over the years?
Yeah, I met Chick in '97. I was playing with the bassist Avishai Cohen in his band, and Chick had heard him and produced his first record called Adama. Steve Wilson was on that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Jeff Ballard and Jason Linder and Avishai and an oud player named Amos Hoffman. Oud and jazz guitar, regular guitar. So Avishai had some real great, interesting music, and Chick dug it. So he produced The Date. It was at Clinton Studio, which no longer exists, of course. So I just thought, oh wow, cool! I'm gonna meet Chick Corea in a working situation. Like, that's great. That's it, And he was really hands off. He didn't say a whole lot, but at this one point, he kind of came out with Avishai's score, and it was so impressive how invested he was in all these younger guys, and he was really there for us. And he comes out, he says, Avishai, can I have my 2 cents with the horn players, with Steve Wilson and me? And I was probably 30 at this point. Steve's a little older than me, and we were seasoned and had been around, but we're still pretty young. And so he comes over, he says, guys, I just want to make a suggestion. He said, now, when I was playing with Miles, well, that gets your attention, as Jackie would often recount his days with Miles, the early days. He says, when I was playing with Miles, it didn't matter whose tune we were playing, if it was one of Wayne's tunes, if it was one of Herbie's tunes that was still in the book, if it was one of mine. Miles had a way of adding a note here, leaving a few notes out here, and within 5 minutes, it was his song. I want you guys to do that. Make it your own.
Wow.
You said that first take was good, the notes are correct, it was fine, but don't just, because it's Avishai's music, don't just play the part. Make it yours. And I just, wow. Just don't take it for granted. Don't just punch the clock, And J-Mac was very much like that too. To go back to him for a second, he told us once, oh, this is hilarious. I subbed briefly in Lionel Hampton's big band in 1991 and 93. In 93, I was playing with Jackie. So we're up in Hartford at J-Mac's house rehearsing. He didn't like it when you played with other people while you're in his band. He was old school, very territorial. Yeah. So he had heard that little Stevie D thinks he's a hot shot and went out to Moscow, Idaho to the Lionel Hampton Festival. That was the day we flew out of New York. That was the day of the first World Trade Center bombing.
Oh, wow!
Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
And wow,
man,
how about that? So, anyway, it was a great experience. At the reception, I saw Al Gray and Lou Rawls and Ray Brown and Hank Jones, and it was just like, I can't believe I'm standing here, in the midst of Lionel Hampton. Anyway, I get back. We're rehearsing some music at Jackie's house. And it was somebody's tune, I can't remember, maybe the trumpet player Raymond Williams, who was in the band at that time. And so he said, okay, we played a line, and then he said, okay, guys, now right here, let's let's find some notes, like have it split off into harmony. So Alan Palmer and I thought we were kind of slick. We said, well, what's the chord? It's C7 sharp 9. So it's a hip chord. Yeah. What note's Jackie playing? Well, he's playing E flat on top. Okay, well, Raymond take a B flat. I'll play an E.
Right.
Boom. Yeah. And it's not like it's a cool sounding, sharp 9 voicing. Yeah. So we said, ba-do-ba-do-ba-do-ba, wah. We hit this sound, and it worked. But J Mac, oh, this is priceless. He says, yeah, okay, look, y'all, this ain't Vic Brown and his orchestra. Man, this is my band. So when I say let's find some notes, man, let's take a minute and find some notes. Then he proceeded to try every note, like all 12 tones, like a kid giving each note a chance. And even when he knew it's going to be wrong, but he was trying to teach us the aesthetic.
Wow. And
he finally, I believe, he arrived at a sharp 11. So it was E, B flat, F sharp, which is actually great. It was better. So somehow it was better. It wound up being better. But along the way, almost out of spite in a way, he played some of the wrongest notes, just to prove a point that, there's more to it than just the theoretical, that, it's kind of a mystical thing. So that's a funny story. And then once we arrived at the chord, he said, okay, now we need to put some dark hoods over those notes, y'all. Put some dark hoods over them. Not tenuto or sforzando or, some musical, classical kind of term. He said, put some dark hoods over those notes, and did a gesture. It was vivid.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll never forget those kind of things. So back to Chick, this is a couple years later for me. When he said that, make it your own, I instantly hearkened to Jackie.
Yeah.
There's a similarity awesome. There,
And the project you guys just did, can you tell us a little bit about that? Or
it's the My Spanish Heart band. It's very much a collaboration or a sort of weaving together of flamenco, Spanish flamenco traditions and flamenco musicians from Spain, and then a sort of Latin jazz configuration. So it was incredible, man. The music's amazing, just amazing. So Mike Rodriguez, is great trumpet players, is on it, and myself, and then the tenor saxophonist is really primarily a flute player from Spain named Jorge Pardo. He's a flamenco legend. He's in his maybe late 60s, and plays great tenor. He's a jazz player, but he's really a flamenco flute player. I think is what he's best known for. And there's a flamenco guitarist named Nino, and he doesn't read music, and I don't know how he's playing this incredibly intricate music. Just brilliant, So there's that element. There's a flamenco dancer named Nino, and he's 33, and an incredible, where they were recording him almost as a percussionist with us. But I know in live performance that's going to take on a whole more different significance for the audience. And then a percussionist from Venezuela named Luisito. I'm just meeting all these guys,
Yeah.
And Carlitos, the bass player from LA, Del Porto, and every musician is incredible.
Yeah.
And Chick, and then me, and I was holding on for dear life at a couple points,
I doubt that, but
but the music is just fabulous. Not a lot of solos. It's more about playing the ensembles. There are a few, you get your spots, but and one of the great things is Ruben Blades sang with us.
Oh, I think I saw the photo on Facebook. Yeah. Awesome.
And what an incredible guy he is. So, it's a real treat. We're going to tour Europe in July, all over Europe, and do the festivals. And So I'm really looking forward to that. I need to practice this music, get back on that.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing project.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, Steve, and talk about your work as a leader. Now, you just finished, it's coming out, and we'll talk about it at the end just to remind everybody, but you're playing at Smoke next week.
Yes, the 7th through the 9th of March.
Right, okay, so hopefully we will have this up and get the word out on our side of things. But the CD is called Correlation. And
Correlations.
Yeah, Correlations.
S, yep.
And but let's talk about. I have many of your records, and I was doing some research for it and looking at it. You're up to now 20 CDs as a leader, which is a significant career in and of itself. Tell us about if you can. And I know you're such a humble cat, but if you have any that jump out at you, that favorite experiences that happen. I was also curious for you, with such a busy schedule as a sideman, and also as you're in your role as a jazz educator, trombone teacher, how you keep your band going and how you keep a working band, and how is it? I know that presents some challenges, but I know it's a lot of a question there. But just talk to us a little bit about your experiences as a leader.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you know from your own experiences as a leader, it's a challenge to keep a band sustained, as far as just playing together, and never mind the economic side of it. But I'm really making a very concerted effort to now shift my career to being a full-time band leader. This is what I want to do. I've always had bands over the years and made a lot of recordings, but it's time to really focus on my own music and just having a group or groups, a few different projects going that you when you go out to play, you're kind of doing it a little more on your own terms. And obviously I wouldn't trade any of the experiences that I've had as a side person all these years. It's been amazing, and I'll continue doing some of those things, of course. But the Correlations band is really special because it's a little bit intergenerational. Two of the young, exciting players are drummer Jonathan Barber and trumpeter Josh Bruno, and they're former Hart students, but they're on the scene, making waves, making their name. And Jonathan Barber has worked with Jeremy Pelt and a whole lot of people, but right now I think he's working with Pat Metheny a little bit. So good for him.
Yeah.
And then Josh Bruno has played with Al Foster. He played with Curtis Fuller a little when he was just starting out, when Josh was starting out. He's played in my band for years. He's busy, and so those two are 30-ish, very exciting players, great friends, and then Desron Douglas, the bassist, and Wayne Escoffrey on tenor. They also went to Hart years ago, and they each studied with Jackie McLean, and so they both of them are very well known and have their own bands and have played with virtually everybody on the scene, and so to be able to have them, is musically great, and it's also, there's a lot of Hartford connection, the J Mac legacy, but it's kind of spread out, and then myself, and then Xavier Davis, the pianist, he's the only kind of non-J Mac guy, but we'll forgive him for that, and he's pretty good.
Yeah, you can overlook it when you play like that.
Yeah. And no, Zave and I go back. We got to play with Freddie Hubbard together with the New Jazz Composers Octet. We worked with Christian McBride's big band together, and Steve Teray and the Bones of Art group a few years ago. And so the correlations are numerous with this group on and off the bandstand. And all I know is we tried some new music last September, and it just took off. Like, it was just such a pleasure and exciting. So the record comes out March 5th, and we're going to revisit some of that music, maybe even try a few new things. And mix in some standards, and just have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll have Willie Jones III with us at Smoke this weekend because JB's out with Pat Metheny. So.
Yeah, so there's your challenge as a band leader. You got to compete with Pat Metheny, right?
Yeah.
to get your players.
You probably won't, but you know, I think an important aspect of this is over the years you develop just different relationships and with great players, so you have a pool of great players that, you know, I'd want to say it's interchangeable. It's not like that. I mean, everybody's unique, but to land on your feet with Willie Jones III, you're good.
All's good. Yeah.
All's right with the world.
That's a great point, though, and thanks for bringing that up. But and that's one of the great things about being in New York is that you develop those relationships, and the pool is a very vast pool of excellent players. And your first person that you called, you know, your second person is going to be equally good, just a little different, you know, whatever it might be. But that's one of the great things about New York. But just to remind everybody, March 7th and 8th at Smoke. And 9th. And Correlations, and it's on the Smoke Sessions label. So coming out March 5th. It's exciting. We're lucky we got you today here to talk about it. So that's awesome. Can we just... I want to throw some names at you that I love. I'm such a huge fan of all these people that I'm going to mention, but just like a couple of thoughts that that your memories of working with them or experience that you've had, and I'm just going to throw maybe a half a dozen names at you. And my all-time favorite improvising brass player, but I love that you got to work with Freddie Hubbard. What was that experience like?
Wow, it was great. We became friends, and which is, you know, to call any of the great musicians we've been talking about today friends, it's like, you know, when I think back to Binghamton and listening to my records, my dad's records, it really is. It's a dream come true, isn't it? I mean, we're
incredible.
We're pretty lucky in that way to have lived all this life and have the music be a way of life. But yeah, Freddie Hubbard, wow. Now this is 01 to 08. So I literally played on his last gig, as it turned out. He was very much who he always was. He looked great. His personality, he was Freddie Hubbard. Mm-hmm. His playing had deteriorated somewhat in those years, well, quite a bit, unfortunately, but not all the time. Like, he still had flashes of that brilliance, especially when he played flugelhorn. And you know, he sat on a stool, and it was an octet, so I literally sat right next to him every time we played for years. And at the Iridium, we toured Europe, we went to Japan, we played around the States. It was I remember thinking his feel, his time, his sound, just the spirit, the essence of his playing. If I could play one phrase as great as what I just heard, that's it. I could just retire. I mean, it was so deep, and we all just look at each other, even when he wasn't full power, because we got spoiled for 35 years of Freddie Hubbard playing superhuman amounts of trumpet, long solos. Like, nobody ever did that. Stretched out like a tenor sax player. He did.
Yeah.
And I think it caught up with him. Another thing, too, it wasn't just the chops. It was, he used to shake his hand. And it turns out he had a spinal surgery eventually toward the end of his life. It was a nerve thing. Like, his fingers weren't lining up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It wasn't just the chops. He was having trouble with that, too.
Wow, interesting.
And I used to wonder, why is he doing that? But because he couldn't, you know, he finally had it addressed. It was just a little too late, unfortunately, for him. But
so great that you got to experience that. Another gentleman in a different realm was Cedar Walton.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Cedar. I got to do a few projects with him, with Eric Alexander, with Joe Farnsworth, a CD called Beautiful Friendship on Crisscross. That was very memorable. And then a couple things that Cedar called me for, to play with Freddie Cole.
Oh, wow, okay.
A record called Merry Go Round. and Cedar did the writing, and that was an octet too. It was Lou Soloff, Blue Lou Marini,
Okay.
Eric Alexander, myself, and Gary Simoleon. And he wrote for us, George Mraz, and that was at Sears Sound. And then there was another date with Vanessa Rubin. And so Cedar kind of pulled me into these projects, and I wish I got to play with him more. I used to go sit in with him after that when he'd play trio or quartet, and we had a great friendship. And believe it or not, he used to call me just to talk, just call me up. It's 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and I used to call him, of course. But I mean, but a few times he'd just call me, and I couldn't get over that. Wow, Cedar Walton's calling me just to chat. Like, I can't even believe this. And so there's one funny story. In 2012, I'm playing Dizzy's with Willie Jones III with his sextet, tribute to Max Roach. I'm staying in this apartment on the Upper West Side that I used to stay in when I had gigs in town, because I lived in Hartford then. And it's January 17th, because that's Cedar's birthday. And I just remember this so well. So I'm getting ready. The cell phone only got reception right next to the windowsill. So I had perched it there. I'm like, man, I got to call Lord Walton. It's his birthday. I'm pulling on my pants, literally, and I see my phone light up, and it's Cedar Walton, 718-63, whatever, his number, 636, I forget. And Cedar's calling. So I thought, okay, you got to have your A game with Lord Walton. So I think I'm pretty ingenious. So I pick up the phone and I said, Lord Walton, his lordship, I believe this would be, as they say, bass ackwards, for shouldn't it be me calling you on your birthday? So I thought, that's pretty good. Without missing a beat, he says, yes, why, Lord Davis, I was merely employing the age-old tactic of the preemptive strike. So
that's great.
You think you might get him one? No. Just see you. Just you could. It was not acceptable. Just, hey, Cedar, how's it going? You can't have some B flat. Had to have a lot of wit popping in there, and he was one of the most intelligent, just witty people I've ever met in my life, and he was very, very kind. He was very encouraging, and big baseball fan. He's a Yankee fan. I'm a Red Sox fan, so we'd bust each other's chops.
Yeah, of course,
right. Yeah, Cedar. Yeah, wow, and I continue to listen to his recordings all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's about as good as it gets, on the piano, and just conceptually, just total mastery.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Horace Silver. I mean, it's
him too.
Yeah. What was that experience like for you?
Oh God! Well, Horace Silver was from Hartford. Well, he's from Norwalk, right up the road, actually, Norwalk, Connecticut. Yeah. But he spent his early formative years, a few years playing in Hartford and living up there, and we all heard about this over the years, living in Hartford. And so when I finally met Horace, I actually met him through playing with Chick, but with Origin, which was the band that came out of Avishai Cohen's band, we were talking about earlier. And we were playing in L.A. because he lived out in L.A. And Horace came to hear Chick's band, and I remember he was at a sound check, just Horace Silver, just sitting at a table listening to us. I thought, wow, man, this is incredible. And he took my phone number, like old-fashioned, wrote down my number and said he liked my sound, and he was going to do the silver and brass again. But it didn't happen. But he did wind up calling me to play a week at the Blue Note. And it's kind of weird that turned out to be his last public gig too, which nobody had any idea, because he was burning. I mean, it was just classic Horace Silver. Right. The music was called "Rockin' with Rachmaninoff," and he, it's great. So when he called me, he said, "Yeah, Steve, I have this. this new record. We recorded it in L.A. in the early '90s, but it never came out. So now we're putting it out. But of course, he's using a New York band when he did the Blue Note, and he said, "Can I tell you about the concept?" Yes, sure, of course. So he said, I had this dream that I met Rachmaninoff in heaven. And that when I met him, I said, "Hey, Rocky, why don't you come on over to the jazz side, and I'll introduce you to all the cats." And then, so there's a tune for Louis Armstrong. There's a tune for I think Sarah Vaughan, Lester Young. I can't remember now. It's been so long. But all his heroes, Coleman Hawkins. The Duke. The jazz icons that he grew up admiring so much. So, and then Rachmaninoff. So he had all these tunes that were so great, and the way the music was arranged, it was quintet. It was Mike Mossman and Eric Alexander actually. So classic Horace trumpet tenor. Then he had another tenor and two trombones. It was Conrad and me.
Oh, okay.
As kind of like harmonic voicings or padding, and the music was so hip. It was just so great. And John Weber and Joe Farnsworth played that week too, and that wasn't planned or anything. It just he happened to call all of us. So Eric, myself, Weber, and Farnsworth, one for all guys, we all got to do a week with Horace. It was pretty amazing. And I used to ask him questions about Hartford and the Connecticut days, and he had one great story where he was playing this place called the Sundown Club, which is way before my time, in the north end of Hartford. And the owner came up to him and said, "Hey, there's someone out in the parking lot waiting to meet you. You should go out and meet this guy." And Horace thought it was about drugs or something. He said, "Oh no, I'm good." He said, "No, you go out there and meet this guy." I almost threatened him. So he goes out to the parking lot. Sitting in the passenger door seat with the door open is Charlie Parker with a stack of 78s. Just, I don't know. So, and his buddy, he was driving back from Storyville, Boston, one of those gigs. This is like 1950, 51, somewhere in there. And he was driving back to New York and probably stopped in Hartford to visit somebody or whatever he was doing. And so Horace asked him to come and sit in if he wanted to, but he never did. But he met Bird in Hartford.
In the parking lot.
And then Stan Getz came to town after that with Woody Herman's Thundering Herd.
Okay.
There was a place called the State Theater, again, way before my time, but one of my neighbors years ago in Hartford always used to tell me about the State Theater, and they'd go in there to hear all the big bands. And so Woody Herman's band comes through. Stan Getz, one of the four brothers, he's a star by that point. Stan liked to hang and find the jam session afterwards, so they said, "Go up. This kid Horace Silver's playing at this club up in the North End." So he kept coming every night. They hit it off. He told Horace, "I'm going to call you. I got a gig in Atlantic City and then some things in New York." And Horace thought, he's just being nice. Sure enough, Stan hired him, and Walter Bolden, who's Desron Douglas's uncle, by the way.
Really? Oh, okay.
And Arthur Taylor's great friend. He passed away, but he's a Hartford guy, and a bassist named Joe Benjamin. And Stan Getz is the one who brought Horace Silver on the scene in New York.
Wow.
And they did
no idea. Wow.
Yeah, and they did some recordings with Jimmy Rainey also.
Okay.
Quintet in Boston and in New York. They're phenomenal. I mean, incredible records. And like you, I never put Stan and Horace together.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
That's that. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's some Hartford jazz history.
Yeah,
there.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, thanks for all those stories. They're just great stuff, and so nice to hear about the rich history of Hartford. I knew that it was rich, but I didn't realize how extensive it really has been over the years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I always get people writing to me after the interview comes out. You didn't ask them about their equipment, and I know you're not like an equipment guy, but I have to ask you what if you can.
It was on my mind.
Okay,
actually.
Great.
Yeah. Courtois.
Okay. Oh, so you I did not know that. All right, I'm glad I asked.
Old Faithful.
Yeah,
I've been playing Old Faithful. It's an old Courtois.
Oh, it's the okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the same one you've been
30 years.
A long time, yeah, okay.
Literally, November 4th of 2018 was 30 years
on that. Okay.
And I can't put it down. It's I got it used in 1988 and that's another Jackie McLean story. I took Mr. McLean. I was still a student, senior, I think, at Hart. I took him to get his horn repaired by Saul Fromkin, who had a young apprentice at the time, Roberto.
Wow.
Yeah. In Midtown, the famous Roberto. What's it called? Well, anyway.
Michiko's.
Michiko's Studio,
and Roberto's Woodwind Shop or whatever.
Roberto's Woodwind Shop, I think is what it's called. Yeah. So, this is a funny one, man. So Jackie gets his horn fixed. Benny Golson walked in. I'm a kid, just mouth hanging open and watching those two. Hey, man, how you doing? And then Renee McLean too. So at the very end, Saul says, "I got some Bundy clarinets and a couple, student model trumpets and a beat up Barry sax for your kids at the Artist Collective up in Hartford." So I'm loading up my station wagon. You could still park in Midtown,
right.
And I'm loading everything up. And then at the very end, he says, "Yeah, and I've got this large bore professional model trombone. It's used, and none of your kids will be able to handle it. It's a big horn." And Jackie said, "Well, this is one of my babies from the college. This is Stevie D. He dubbed me that."
Yeah, right.
Steve, you want to check it out? Sure. So I'll never forget. He opened the case, and it was like the singing sword. Oh, like look at this thing, and it was in such mint condition. It was used, but I played one note. I played an E flat right there, and Jackie said, "Yeah, like warm butter." And I played for about 5 minutes, and Jackie said, "Man, that horn sounds good." He goes, "Man, you want a cop, man? You want to get it?" I said, "Well, but Jackie, Mr. McLean in those days, I don't have any. Son, do you want the horn? But I don't have any. Do you want the horn or not?" I said, "Well, yeah." "Okay, Saul." He puts his arm around me. "Stevie's going to take the horn. How much you want for it?" So now he's buying the horn after Saul just gave him a bunch of instruments.
Wow.
What a hustle. Tremendous. And Saul goes like this. Oops, sorry.
He knew what just happened, right?
He says, "Jackie, anything for you." And he says, "Kid, you got to promise me you're not going to make a killing on resale. This horn's worth $1,500. Have the kid send me a check for $400 when he gets back to Hartford." Jackie says, "Right, you're going to send the check right away, right, son?" And I walked out with this horn for no money at that time. I sent the check, $400.
Wow.
Still playing it. And
good investment.
Yeah.
Well spent $400.
I guess so. Shires gave me a horn several years back they kind of designed it somewhat based on my Courtois, and it's a wonderful instrument. So, I still have that, and need to be in touch with them actually about that because Courtois, I've been a Courtois guy my whole life, but I don't play one of their new models, but we're working on that. So that possibly I can try one of their new horns soon down at the showroom.
Okay.
And I would love to, continue that relationship, of course.
Sure.
I've tried Old Kings and Yamahas and Khans, and there are just so many great horns. Wrath makes a great horn.
Right.
But yeah, it's been Courtois for me my whole
awesome.
life.
Yeah.
And it's a large bore, large shank, 8.5 inch bell, but it's the bore size. I've had it measured with a caliper several times. It's 542.
Oh, okay. So a little bit under.
Not 547.
Yeah, right.
And it's lighter. I use a Marcinkiewicz 5G mouthpiece. Slide hit me to that.
Big equipment for a person with your facility and
oh,
range.
Geez. I wish. I've never been a high note guy. If I'm giddy, I can hit a nice, strong high D. And I've popped an E flat out in my life, and even an F or an E once in a while. But I can't afford those notes, man.
I don't hear it as a problem, Steve. I really don't.
Yeah, I guess you pay your bills between B flat and B flat, C, D flat. A couple octaves and a little, and that's about it.
That's a great way to put it. Great way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, before we close out, Steve, just a reminder to everybody: Correlations coming out on March 5th, March 7th through the 9th is he'll be at Smoke. Look forward to checking that out. And
thank you.
I always kind of wrap things up, and you are the absolute perfect guy to ask this, especially I know with your son and being a proud pop of an outstanding young musician yourself. And you have all your students that follow follow what you say to the T. But what advice do you have for the person that's sitting out there saying, "Man, I want to be the next Stevie D," and how do I do it?
Good luck. Good luck with that. I recently wrote a piece for Downbeat for the brass school. Okay. I think it might be just coming out, and I've never done anything like that before per se. But where I kind of address this, and just to hopefully briefly, the times that I've been in front of a room full of trombone players, aspiring jazz trombonists, and they're all sitting at desks, and there's no piano there, and it's 9 or 10 in the morning, and my first thought is, really swinging. This is a real swinging scenario here. There's no rhythm section, and they're all kind of hungry, especially the younger ones. They're looking at you like they want to take a bite out of your leg, like there he is. He's gonna play high, fast, loud, And I'm of course kidding, but it occurred to me a long time ago to talk about there's sort of an order of things. To be a jazz player or an improvising trombonist, trombone is down the order. It's not number one.
No, yeah.
You're a human being, hopefully, every day of your life, unless you're some kind of alien. And so then they kind of look at you like, huh? Why is he talking about that? Like the younger cats especially. And so being the person you are will have infinitely more to do with how you're going to sound than anything else. Your equipment, how much you practice, your technique, your harmonic knowledge. Yeah, all of this is part of our craft, and it's very important. But who you are, are you considerate? Are you a good listener? Do you have a sense of humor? And there's no one way to be, but if you're just trying to be a good, decent person and thoughtful, and that will come, especially as an improviser, but also your ensemble playing, like those sensibilities will manifest themselves through your horn.
Mm-hmm. No doubt, yeah.
More than anything else, honestly. And then, second to me is, are we walking, talking music 24/7 without the horn in our hands? Mm-hmm. Can you just embody whatever music you're dealing with and sing it, clap it, and you just get it across? So third, and do you know something about the piano too is in there, so you can kind of, when you do get the horn in your hands, you've got something to say now. And as an improviser, I think about this a lot. We kind of play piano on the trombone. I mean, that's we can't play multiple notes at once. We're a single note instrument, multiphonics. Okay,
right.
That's cool.
Typically single, yeah.
But generally, we're one note at a time. But if you have a chordal kind of, where you're seeing the harmony, then you get the horn and you can see it, you can hear so much better. So you got to know some piano. And plus the piano's a drum. It's a very sophisticated drum, but harmonically, but it's so your rhythm. I would say to aspiring young players, be a fan of the rhythm section. Really listen to the bass and the drums and the piano. Listen to Cedar Walton Trio records, Hank Jones Trio, Horace Silver, Bill Evans, Mulgrew Miller, God bless his soul. Whoever you're listening to, try to understand that what makes jazz music go is the rhythm section. And then my dream used to be, could I go to Bradley's and just sit in with Hank Jones or Kenny Barron, Ray Drummond, Ben Riley, and could I just sit in and not screw it all up, just kind of flow in there, or Cedar, and I did wind up playing with Hank Jones too, and oh man, and so I'm so humbled to even say that I made a record with Hank Jones or Cedar Walton, but because I don't know, there's something about the elegance of a great trio.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And then for me, if I could just kind of play with that sensibility and language and just kind of flow in there as a fourth member of the trio, it doesn't make any sense. But, you know, then maybe I'm doing something halfway decent. And, you know, there are plenty of players who play. I took my kids right here in Latham Park in Stamford last summer with my wife, Abena. She's a great vocalist and great musician and an ethics and social justice chair and teacher at the Ethical Culture Field.
And there you guys are right there in the lovely wedding photo.
Wife,
That's awesome.
And so we took my kids, Angie and Nikki, my two younger kids, who are both very musical, by the way. Angie sings, Nikki plays saxophone, and they're 17 and 12.
Okay.
Angie's 17, Nikki's 12. So we went to hear Trombone Shorty.
Oh, wow.
Right over here.
Okay.
And that was my point, is that he's an entertainer. I love him.
Yeah, I do too.
I think he's great.
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Trumpet, singing, dancing,
yeah.
you know, playing the trombone, and he can play the heck out of the trombone.
Yeah.
So that's an approach. That's a style. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Our colleague, the great Wycliffe Gordon, he's incredible. He and I are the same age. I mean, he's an incredible musician and trombonist and voice in the music. Just a different style, but really, it's not that different. Abena and I have been to New Orleans a few visits in the last few years, and Memphis as well. I had never been in Memphis all these years, and just to walk around the French Quarter, to walk Frenchman Street in New Orleans or Beale Street in Memphis. I don't know. I feel like I'm in a little different place in my life where I'm kind of ready. I'm going back and listening to Tyree Glenn and Dickie Wells and Jack Teagarden. Who plays better than Jack Teagarden?
Right.
Nobody. I mean, it's like air in his hands. Like it's just how he sang. I'm kind of trying to get in touch with that a little more. I don't know that I'll ever be a plunger guy. My main influence is Curtis Fuller.
Of course.
Slide, JJ. You don't hear it. They didn't play the plunger. Or Chet Baker or Kenny Dorham or Donald Byrd or Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard, Miles.
Yeah.
But Al Gray, Clark Terry, heck yes. So I have the influence of that style without maybe having to do it so obviously. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that's always struck me about your playing and writing is just what you just described, the openness, and you're the exact same person that you are as a musician. You're just open, warm, inviting, and like you said, that really comes through in your playing. I think that's like the best piece of advice you could get. You know, we all need to work on ourselves as a person, and that's going to help. That's going to help our musicianship at the same time. So it's incredibly great advice. Thank you.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you got to practice. We all have to do that and keep your chops up. You know, but it's a big deal. You know, the other thing too, Mike, is to sing through your horn. Really sing, and you know that's where kind of the going back a little bit in the history stylistically really helps to remind you of that. I saw some footage recently. Tyree Glenn's playing Mood Indigo with Louis Armstrong. Excuse me, he was in his band. It's 1968 in England. And Pops introduces him. It's his feature, and he plays Mood Indigo. And oh man, it's just so soulful. He's singing, and I think he plays Quentin Jackson's solo verbatim.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Butter
Okay.
Jackson, yeah. And but the control, the lyricism, it's a big deal. You know, Steve Ture often addresses this with so much integrity, just to play clearly and articulate. Steve always says that you've got to articulate, and you know he's right.
Right.
He's working next to him has helped me. Whenever you play next to Steve, you better eat your Wheaties. And
Yeah,
you know,
right.
I thanked him recently because the first times I played with him years ago, I was kind of playing close to the mic, and he kind of got on my case about it a little bit. And
Right.
then I realized, you know, he's right. You should establish your sound, and then the mic is just there to help you when you need it. If the bass amp's loud, if it's a big venue, you got to use the mic, of course. But
Right.
yeah, that's helped me, I think, just become a stronger player over time. So
That's awesome.
I kind of thanked him for that. I said, yeah, you used to bust my chops about the mic, but thank you. You know?
Well, Steve, thank you, man. Thanks for taking time out today, and more than that, thanks for everything you've given to the music in general, to our instrument. You are a beacon, and you are like the people that you and I look up to. You're that person now that we're all looking up to as well. So, and I know how crazy your schedule is, and we've been working on this for a
Likewise,
while. And
yeah.
so, thank you so much for letting us come up to Stanford today and find out more about your extraordinary career. And everybody check out the new CD coming out next week, Smoke, this summer in Europe with Chick Corea. The list goes on, and we can't wait to see what, you know, continues to unfold for Steve Davis. So
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Steve.
it. Thanks so much.
Hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. This was one of my favorites. What an amazing experience. And we will see all of you next time on Bone to Pick.